you give us this draft pick and this player, and we'll give you this player that we have. Fine, done, deal. Well, that's fine. The only leverage that players have in that is to say, if this all happens, I'm not showing up.
Right. Because it's not free agency.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that it's because of the city they're traded to or anything else. That's the only leverage they have. But so what happens is, and what has evolved from that, is the idea that, well, listen, we're going to trade for you, but I know that you didn't have any say in it, so we're going to give you a new deal. The Bills did it for LaShawn McCoy. When LaShawn McCoy got traded to Buffalo from Philly,
2015, I looked at it
less than a week later, the Bills said, here you go. Here's a new deal for you.
4 days later.
4 days later, the Bills signed him to a new deal. So it's a common thing. That's the way it's done, because the player has no say in it. The new team wants him to show up with putting his best foot forward, say, here's a little refresher for you. And, certainly it's for a player of Antonio Brown's caliber, you can say, yeah, okay, I get it. It's like LaShawn McCoy, an elite running back as he has been. And was at the time. I thought he was at the height of his career when they traded for him. Well, yeah, give him a good deal so he shows up, spunky, right? You would probably think you're going to do that for Antonio Brown.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if it got to that point with Antonio Brown with the Bills. So all this stuff about he doesn't like Buffalo, it's crazy talk.
Foolish.
It never got down the road that far. The Bills had open conversations with the Steelers. They hadn't finalized any terms of their end of the deal with the Steelers. And then also, you still got all these other moving parts with the player. So it was fun while it lasted for about an hour. But the truth of the matter is, I think somebody on some end of it, either Ian Rappaport, the Steelers, Antonio Brown's people, you name it. I don't think the Bills had anything to do with it, but somebody's drumming up interest for Antonio Brown. And they used the Bills and real conversations that they were having, although they weren't very substantive. And they used them as the clickbait to do it. So
I think the Steelers are drumming up interest. The Steelers want to get as much as they can for a very talented player. It would not surprise me at all. They dropped that story on Ian Rappaport at some point last night, as they see their Friday deadline coming up and say, hey, we'd like to get more than what Buffalo's offering. Let's kind of throw a few logs on the fire. That's what they did. Rappaport jumped. He probably could have handled it better, I would think. I'm not going to criticize the way he goes about his business, but in an effort to be first with the story that the Bills are involved, he probably took it a little bit too far, I believe.
Yeah.
Here, a couple of other things I'd like to get off my chest. I'd like to salute the Buffalo Bills' aggressiveness. And look, I said it to you. I believe you were here yesterday on the show. I said it to Chris Brown. I am surprised and excited about how active and aggressive the Bills have been already, even as free agency hasn't even started yet. Active in this case in a potential trade. Maybe there's more trades that we don't know about. We probably don't know about 75% of the trades that the Bills talk about, probably more than that. But I love the Bills' aggressiveness to say, hey, best receiver in the game is potentially available. Let's make a call. Let's see how far we can get. And they got down the road a little bit. Not as close as Rappaport said, but they got down the road and on a potential trade. I love that about this Bills organization. They've done it consistently. Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott since they got here. How do we get better? What do? We talk about not leaving any stone unturned. Boom. Here's an example of that. And I love the fact that they're like that. I really do.
I do too. I think it's great. I think you got to check it out. I know Antonio Brown's got all the stuff we think he might or might not have. I mean, you never hear bad things about him as a teammate, but he was a problem in the last half of this last season in Pittsburgh. He was a problem child, and there ain't no two ways about it. He was a problem. He didn't show up for the last game, and he just didn't go to practice. He did everything the worst guy you've ever heard of does things.
And he's been a problem since the season ended, including
yes.
This what was it, Monday? We played the clip of his interview on ESPN, right, with Jeff
Darlington
idiotic. About I don't care if I ever play again. Basically, is what he was saying, right?
I mean, what he's trying to do is drive the price down for the Steelers, so he could probably give it to the Steelers a little bit. He knows. I think in his heart, he knows he's never playing for them again. He refuses to. That's what he said. He said, I don't need to play, so I'm not gonna play for the Steelers. But you're gonna trade me. And I'm going to make sure everybody can afford me because I'm going to be such a problem out here that nobody's going to want me that much. So I'm going to go, and I'm going to take it. And so that's kind of – it seems like the only strategy that makes sense for him.
Yeah. Which is debatable whether that's a good strategy. I don't know that it is.
Right.
I want to say this, though, too, and this is part two. First of all, I salute the Bills for being that aggressive, that proactive. Secondly, people might recoil when I say this, but I'm glad they didn't get him. I really am. I know he's one of the best receivers in the game, one of the best players in the game. He's got a record of production. Reports, we had Chris Brown on the show with us at the Combine last week. Our own Chris Brown was talking to his contacts in the Steelers who were saying, this thing's kind of overblown what a bad guy he is. He has a problem with Roethlisberger, but really he's a hard worker and a dedicated teammate. Okay, I hear that. I don't know if I'm buying it. And it came down to this, and I thought hard about this today, Steve. If the trade had been consummated and if Antonio Brown had a spot on the Buffalo roster, it'd take me a long time, if ever, to get to the point where I would absolutely trust him to be a good teammate when things got rough. And things get rough for the Bills, for the Steelers, for every single team, for the New England Patriots. There are hard patches along the way in the season. I don't know if I would ever be 100% trusting in Antonio Brown handling it the right way as far as being a teammate. Look, if he engineers a trade and gets to where he wants to go, things get rough somewhere else, why wouldn't he follow the same path? Stop going to practice, not play in the final game of the year, publicly critique his teammates. Why wouldn't he do it? It worked once for him. With that in mind, as talented as he is, and I'm not talking about this Bills culture, we'll get to that too. I'm talking about any team. I would not want him on my team because I don't know if I'd ever be comfortable not worrying about him, not liking the pass that sailed over his head, not liking the fact that the Bills ran it 28 times and only threw it 26 times. I mean, I don't know if I'd ever be comfortable with that with him on the roster.
Yeah, and here's the thing. No, but here's what I see, and it takes a lot of willpower to do it because I don't know if it's not the guy you are because there's got to be a little bit of that in him to be acting this way. He's not just making it up. But here's the thing. I think he's driving his price down for the Steelers for this reason. It's enough that a team is going to trade for him or whatever they're going to trade. Steelers asking a number one for him or whatever, or if they're asking a number one, 2-1s or whatever, 2-2s or whatever. Let's face it, before this all happened, Antonio Brown was untraded. They didn't want to trade him. You couldn't give the Steelers enough, right? So the price was very high for Antonio Brown, and it's been perceived to be very high up to this point. He's trying to get it down. He's trying to make it so nobody wants to trade for him so he can, one, get it out of Pittsburgh, but two, if a team gives a fifth-round pick for Antonio Brown, then they'll be more apt to give him a big contract to get him there. You know what I'm saying? A fifth round plus the contract, that's not so much as a one and the contract. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So if he can drive down the price that it takes to get him, that leaves more on the table for him to get personally once the team does trade for him. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you're not going to get him for a fifth, though. Come on.
I'm exaggerating to make a point. If you can get him for a bag of footballs, you can trade a bag of footballs for Antonio Brown. You've got a lot of capital left over that you didn't give for him that you can give him as cash in his new salary. That's what his thinking is. That's what I'm thinking.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So if a team is not going to say, listen, we'll trade for you, but we're not going to trade for you and pay you a new contract, which is, like we said, a little bit customary. We're not going to do that. We'll trade for you, but you got to come play for us. So that there's a lot of moving parts, and you can't get inside another guy's mind.
Right.
And that's why this was so complicated. And that's why I'm sure, you can say, the Bills were outed as being interested in him. But there's a lot of teams that are that are making those phone calls saying, okay, what's it going to take? What about it? And they start looking at the complexities of it and said, there's just no way. We can't pull it off.
I like the fact that the Bills are interested in made inquiries.
I think you got to, right?
Yeah. No, you don't have to, but I'm glad the Bills did. I mean, it fills a need they have, obviously. It's one of the best players in the game, obviously. So, yeah, I see what you're saying. You got to at least make the calls. They got a little bit further than a couple of calls, but maybe not quite as far as what Ian Rappaport reported. Yeah, and I'm excited about that. The narrative that came out, and again, this thing, classic Twitter, this thing comes out, the report comes out, the deal is shut down. Immediately it's Antonio Brown shut the deal down. I don't know about that. I don't think that's the case.
I don't think that
And
either.
it's certainly not about something wrong with the Bills or Buffalo. And I'm not, I think, I'm not Mr. Chamber of Commerce here, but the Bills are not that much different than 31 other NFL teams. They really are not. And their money is the exact same as 31 other NFL teams. And I think that's much more important than, you don't like the nightlife here or, there's too much snow on the ground. I think that's silly. It's silly to think that.
Certainly Buffalo's a smaller market city. It's a unique town, but, you're telling me it's, they're whatever. You can go down that road and you can debate it all you want. But the simple fact of the matter is that's that's pretty low on the priority list of what these guys are talking about. I think it would probably have more to do with the fact that Antonio Brown, if some of these teams, if they get deeper into this, I think they say, okay, what's it going to, if we trade for you, Antonio, do we have to give you a new contract? And if Antonio says, yeah, you need to give me a new contract.
And here's the
parameters of it. I need it got to be this much, this much, this much. The team's going,
exactly.
We ain't trading for that.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that could be the whole scenario too, which is why he may be acting like a petulant child, making sure that they don't have to trade too much to get him so they can afford paying him.
It's an interesting story, needless to say, and we're going to talk about it a lot today, and you're welcome to join us. The phone line's open, 803-0550. Toll-free from outside Buffalo, 1-888-550-2550. And our Twitter poll is about this. I have said a minute ago, Steve, I want to get your take before we introduce this Twitter question. I'm glad the Bills made the effort, and I'm glad that it's not going to happen. I would not trust that guy to be a good, faithful teammate while he's with the Buffalo Bills. What about you? Basically, I'm asking you to answer our Twitter poll. Our Twitter poll today is, would you have wanted Antonio Brown on the Bills? Would you have? I acknowledge how good he is, too.
I would say yes, I would want him on it.
And you wouldn't worry about?
I would not.
How could you put that? How can you put that away?
Listen, it was the guy's been in the league 9 years and never heard a peep out of him. His reputation has been one for being one of the hardest workers around. I think this episode that we've seen in these last 3 or 4 months has been calculated, and given the climate in the NFL of how you work contracts, how you get traded, how you can force a trade, these guys feel like they're almost backed into a corner to do this, to posture like this, to get traded and to make the machine work for your benefit. And I think that's what Antonio Brown's been doing. Now, granted, it makes him look bad publicly.
Because it is bad.
It is. But I don't think if you're going to put him on your team and you start letting him play football with the club, I think he'll turn into the guy that got him to where he was an 11,000-yard receiver and caught 800 balls. I think that's the guy he is, and I think this is all to get him away from a bad situation in Pittsburgh. I wish they'd have gotten him.
I have a problem with that. I would have a problem with that. But we can discuss. That's our Twitter poll. Would you have wanted Antonio Brown on the Bills? You can vote on Twitter right now with 700 votes in. 59% of you say no, you would not have wanted Antonio Brown on the Bills. 41 say yes. That's pretty close, Steve. You're Mr. Close Votes. That's fairly close right now.
Pretty close. I think a lot of people that got out there somehow, like you just said, he nixed the deal because he doesn't like Buffalo, and I think that's coloring the novos. Yep. And believe me, I'm with you. If somebody didn't want to be here, you don't want them here.
That's right.
I'm totally with you on that. I just don't think that's accurate. I don't think it ever got to the point where Antonio Brown said, no, I don't want to go to Buffalo. I mean, good grief, he's playing in Pittsburgh.
We're not that different than Pittsburgh.
Cleveland,
Take
Detroit,
a look around.
And Detroit.
Buffalo looks a lot like Pittsburgh. Now, the one thing that I hear people say, too, is, well, the Bills, have trouble winning. Yes, they have had trouble winning.
There's that.
But I think they're on the way up, and anybody who takes more than a half second to look at it would say, something might be happening up there in Buffalo. Maybe that's what stops them. Again, another reason why I'm glad they didn't make the deal happen. What do you think? Let's get to your responses. 803-0550, toll-free, 1-888-550-2550. Pretty simple question. The simple Twitter polls are best, right? Would you have wanted Antonio Brown on the Bills? We know it's not going to happen. Give us a call and let's discuss. Let's go to Kevin in Hamburg to get it started. Hello, Kevin. You're on the air.
How you doing?
Okay.
Good.
I wouldn't have wanted him because we're trying to build a good chemistry here and trying to turn this team into something awesome, and we don't need any football drama BS to deal with.
Interesting point, Kevin. And let me just talk about chemistry for a second. I've heard it said that how can it be that the Bills, these Bills, Brandon Beane, Sean McDermott's Bills, would even consider that guy? I think people sometimes misinterpret their idea of chemistry, Beane and McDermott. I think when they talk about chemistry, they're talking about who wants to play, who wants to practice hard, who wants to meet our standard of how we practice and then how we play on Sunday. If you don't, then you're not our culture. I don't think it has anything to do with, are you going to church? Do you not swear? Do you help old ladies across the street? That's not what they're looking. That's not what they're looking at. I mean, all that stuff is great, and there are certainly many examples of great human beings in that Buffalo locker room. There have been for several years now, but that's not what they're looking at when they talk. I'm sure when they look at Antonio Brown, and as they got into it over the last couple of days since Tuesday, I guess it started. They probably investigated all of this stuff and probably got deep into what happened at the end of the year with Pittsburgh. But I think it can be over-exaggerated, the emphasis that Bean and McDermott put on chemistry. What do you think there, Mr. Tasker?
There's no question that nobody is going to, invite a player into your team that doesn't want to be there. No question about it. I just think that we get caught up in. We take the jokes too seriously. We take it too personally. Listen, think about yourself. When you've got a business deal going, when you've got an opportunity to make your life a lot better, an opportunity to change the course of your future with a decision about a job or a career, you do take that very seriously. And one of the considerations is where it is, but that has more to do with, for most of us. And I know when my kids all started to get up and grown up and get married and start to think about careers and stuff, staying around where your family grew up was a consideration, but that's not part of the conversation when you talk about NFL football players. There's only 32 places where you can play, and you got to go to one of those. And listen, this stuff you hear about players, I don't want to play there, I don't want to play here. Certainly there's good and bad about every situation. There's bad things about playing for the Giants, just like there's bad things about playing for the Chargers. Don't think these players are sitting back there telling their agent, I don't want to play in Buffalo because I don't like cold weather. Come on. You got to wake up. These guys are more adult than that. It has to do with the vibe of the team, the money. It has to do with the opportunity to play. And in this case, for Antonio Brown we're talking about, he does not want to play in Pittsburgh. He refuses because his of a toxic relationship with his quarterback. He won't do it. So that forces the whole thing. So don't think he's going to go back and play in that toxic atmosphere rather than play here. That's crazy. So I don't buy it. I don't believe it, and you shouldn't either. I'm telling you. It's been my experience of talking to guys over the course of my 22-year broadcasting experience and the 13 years I played. Guys will say it, and they'll do it after the fact. They'll say, hey, yeah, I didn't like it here because of that. I didn't like it there because of that. But you know what? Not too many guys leave Buffalo saying they were sorry they came here. That carries as much weight as anybody. You can't get caught up in that. This has to do with trade value, a guy who wants out of one team, teams inquiring about him, getting new contracts. It has to do with compensation. That's it. That's the bottom line. Antonio Brown's compensation, the Steelers' compensation, and who's going to pay it and where he's going to play. It doesn't have anything to do with his preference about sunshine or snow.
Or I think, too, offense. Like what kind of – I've heard it said and talked about on the radio and seen it in some of the tweets. Well, he wouldn't want to play in this offense. Who knows what this offense is, right? Last year they had a very poor offensive line. They had no wide receiving targets and a rookie quarterback. This offense is still very much in development. A player the caliber of the talent of Antonio Brown would have been a major factor in this offense. They might have turned immediately from a run first offense to a pass first offense. So I don't even put much stock in that. On the tweet sheet, would you have wanted wide receiver Antonio Brown on the Bills? Nick tweets in, yes. Never imagined it would happen before reports, but was very excited at possibilities after. Now, just disappointed with another thing for haters to talk about. Vontae, 4 Super Bowl losses, the drought, AB won't go to Buffalo, etc. I'm over it. I hope Bills punch teams in the mouth this season. Nick, I hope you're over it, because that's is Vontae Davis a factor, guy who quits at halftime? Do we look bad? Do the Bills look bad because Vontae Davis stepped out at halftime and decided to retire? I don't think so. I don't want to get – I hate to hear people get caught up in that stuff, Steve.
Yeah.
The 4 Super Bowl losses 25 years ago. I think we can put that away.
You can trust me. It was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I get it. You kind of get tired of it. It ceases to be fun anymore, and it ceases to, we live in this city that, and I was a big part of as anything, being part of those 4 Super Bowl teams that couldn't win. But by the same token, I take great pride in the fact that these guys, like Lorenzo Alexander, and there's a list, guy after guy, Takeo Spikes, all these guys, London Fletcher, all these players that have come into Buffalo and through Buffalo on their journeys through their football careers have all loved it here. I had a former head coach in the National Football League who was an assistant here way back in the day who said his wife cried 2 times. She cried when we went to Buffalo, and then she really cried when we left. People love this town. That was a guy who was a head coach, still a good friend of mine. He says, we loved Buffalo when we were there.
Yeah, there's
we
nothing to be defensive
Don't
about.
Don't worry about it,
No.
because everybody's got everybody's got something on them. And listen, I've heard more players complain about other teams and the situations they had there than I have guys complain about the way it was in Buffalo. It's just, and that goes with the drought and it's been over 20 years since we've won a playoff game. All these things that we haven't been successful on the field does not say anything about the quality of experience the players have had of being a part of this team and this community.
All right, so Steve mentioned Lorenzo. Lorenzo Alexander is going to be on the show with us today at 2 o'clock. Little Friday lowdown with Lorenzo. And coming up at 1 o'clock, our buddy Greg Cosell from NFL Matchup on ESPN. We'll talk about all of these issues, but got a lot of time for you to weigh in on the no deal for Antonio Brown. What do you think? Would you have wanted him on the team anyway? Give us a call. Let's discuss. 803-0550, toll-free 1-888-550-2550. Send in your tweet. We might read it on the tweet sheet. Come on back. We're just getting warmed up. One Bills Live, presented by Kaleida Health from One Bills Drive. This is Buffalo Bills Radio. We are back. Welcome. It's a Friday at One Bills Live. We got a lot to talk about today, Steve.
Wow.
Was there any doubt in your mind, no matter how sick you were, when you heard the news that you were coming back in today? I got to get in there. I want a pizza the second. You're a gamer. He's a player.
I thought about it, too, because I thought, wow, this.
If I don't show up
for all
today.
The days that there's nothing going on anywhere, this is not a day you want to miss.
It's not one of them.
And then you find out, it's almost like, I don't know. They kind of picked the Bills because they just happened to be maybe the last team that the Steelers talked to, or they maybe talked to them more. Well, the guy Rappaport.
Well, I think the Bills were kind of a surprised entry, right? I mean, we'd heard about the Raiders, we heard about a couple other teams,
the
but
Cardinals had asked.
The Bills were the surprise entry, right? The unknown team that nobody figured, and it's a story, but it needed, I think, a little more. I'm not going to tell Ian Rappaport how to do his job, but it needed more development. It needed more sourcing, I would think.
He was wrong, man.
Let's hear from you. What do you think?
And then what's worse, I think it's like he got used.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm guessing the Steelers, who are in a hurry to get this deal done.
They were trying to make it sound like they were going to do it so they could get a couple of phone calls real quick. Say, hey, wait a minute, what's the deal?
We knew better than Buffalo.
What are they doing? What are they giving you?
Yeah. Would you have wanted Antonio Brown on the Bills? That's our question, kind of a basic, simple question, which we have taken a liking to here. On the tweet sheet from Bogey McBurdy, would you have wanted Antonio Brown on the Bills? He says, only if he wanted to be here. I was excited but really nervous about the possibilities. Glad to see McBean is willing to try to make this team better. Yeah, and that is an understated part. The aggressiveness, the eagerness to make a bold. Look, they're bold, man. Even in the people they send packing, you might think twice or 3 or 4 times before you trade away Marcel Darius, Sammy Watkins. You might look at him and say, not really the kind of culture player that we want here. We don't like the way he shows up for work. We don't like his practice regimen. In both cases, kind of early first-round picks that cost a lot. Yes, an earlier regime, I get that, but trading them away. They're bold, right? This is bold, to reach out and say, what would it take for us to get Antonio Brown? That's bold. I love that about it, even though I'm glad it worked out this way and they don't have him. I know he's a good player.
If for nothing else, for no other reason, it shows you that they are doing their job.
Yeah.
They're on it. That nothing's going to get by him without being checked out. You got to make some calls and say, what's the story? How much? What do you want for him? What have you been offered? And it gets to the point, well, okay, well, you know what? If it changes, let us know. We'll talk to you more. All of that stuff, and it just makes you feel like you've got a team in a front office that are making sure that the stones get turned over to see what's underneath them to make sure they don't miss anything.
Got a call on the line from Clayton on his cell phone. Hello, Clayton. Go ahead. You're on the air with us.
Hi, how y'all doing?
Great.
Good.
Thank you.
I'm good. But point blank answer your question, yeah, I would have been extremely glad if he came to the team, but I'm not extremely disappointed that he's not on the team because it's a win-win for the Bills. I just feel like it has nothing to do with him coming to Buffalo. That's not a thing. It's a professional sport. Guys are going to play wherever they're going to get paid, if you ask me.
Yeah, I agree.
Right. I agree with you, Clayton.
I mean,
agree.
Think about this. And this is total speculation on my part. But how about this scenario, Steve? They talk to the Steelers, work out some aspects of what what the compensation might be in a trade. Okay, then they turn the page, maybe yesterday, maybe sooner than that, and start talking to the agent, Drew Rosenhaus. And Drew Rosenhaus says, hey, we expect to be one of the top 3 players in the game. We expect to be the highest paid wide receiver. We expect to be we expect the biggest salary in the game, the highest guarantee, whatever. That's the kind of thing that would shut a deal like this down, and maybe that's what happened.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
money. As Clayton points out, it's professional sports. I go. What was our Twitter poll 2 days ago? Most determining factor on where free agents
land. Yeah,
it's money, and this to me seems like it's as simple as money. What? You're not going to make me the highest paid offensive player in the game? I'm not interested.
Yeah, and that
that
doesn't have anything to do with Buffalo. It doesn't have anything to do with Cleveland or Detroit or Pittsburgh or anybody. That has to do with money and the budget. That's it. So, and I think that's a much more. I think that's the scenario, the likely scenario that came through. I mean, it's Antonio Brown. It wasn't about the city. It was about the money, if for any other thing. But I don't know that. But certainly that's the only leverage he's got.
Here's a call from Bill on his cell phone. Hello, Bill. Go ahead. You're on the air with us.
Hello. I'm glad he didn't come here.
Why's that, Bill?
I think he would have been another in a long list of players that were big distractions.
Okay.
It might have been, Bill. And here's the thing, and this is the point I was trying to make earlier. I would look. He would come here. He's a good player, by the way. He's a really good player. I've said that a couple times. I would worry about the game where he got 2 targets or 3 targets and wasn't happy with that, or the game where Josh Allen sailed the ball over his head inadvertently, or a game where Shady McCoy got more touches than he did. I would worry that in those cases, based on what he's done here in the last couple months, that he might revert to this sort of behavior, like tweeting live on Facebook out of the locker room, or electing not to go to practice, that sort of thing. I would worry about that with him. I would never, maybe he'd be good, but I would always in the back of my mind think he is capable of disrupting and sabotaging an entire locker room, which he did in Pittsburgh. I would worry about that.
Yeah, it's got to be your number one concern after the money and after the compensation. When you get him on your team, is it going to help you or is it going to hurt you? Is he going to play great? But is he going to make other guys play worse because he's, a bad guy to be around? Is he going to make guys not want to come into work? Is it going to be one of those kind of toxic atmospheres, which it turned out to be in Pittsburgh late in the season? So that's always the 2 sides of the coin. I think guys, I don't know, maybe it's me. I think the best of people. I think Antonio Brown has calculated this whole scenario to get out of Pittsburgh. He's got reasons other than what he is or who he is, to be perceived as the guy he is. I think he's got reasons for that, and that's to get out of Pittsburgh and change the course of his career while he can, and he's using whatever leverage he can to do it.
And yet he has made it more difficult for them to move him. With his comments, including earlier this week when he talked about how he doesn't need football.
He doesn't.
With his contract demands, which may have been passed along by his agent to the Buffalo Bills. You know what I'm saying? He hasn't made it easy to be traded.
Yeah, but here's the thing you're forgetting, Murph. He doesn't care because he's not playing for Pittsburgh again. He doesn't care if they trade him or not. He's made that clear with that crackpot interview he did. He's going to sit at home. The Steelers have got to trade him for whatever they can get because he will absolutely not play for them ever again. That's the leverage he's got, and the Steelers know it. So they've got to drum up interest. They've got to find a taker for him because if it comes to it, if Antonio Brown doesn't play for the Steelers and they don't trade him, he's not playing for anybody, and they're stuck without him.
But here's the thing. They just went through this with Le'Veon Bell. He didn't play for anybody. You know what I mean?
That's right.
Now, who won that situation? I don't know. I don't know who won that. Did the Steelers win not having Bell this year? Did Bell win? It doesn't appear so. I guess my point is the Steelers are used to their top players saying, oh, I'm not playing here anymore. And the Steelers are like, well, okay. Now, where does that get you? Probably not very far in the postseason.
Right. Problem is, Antonio Brown's got a contract, and Le'Veon Bell didn't. They offered him $14.5. They made him a great. Who were we kidding? They offered him 2 years ago. They offered him $30 million guaranteed in the first 2 years. He turned it down. Le'Veon Bell is never ever going to make the money back that he lost by holding out and not signing the franchise tag. He's never ever going to make it back. It was a bad business decision on him. He may have made some sort of moral statement about the state of the league and about how players don't have the right to play where they want or whatever. You can say he might have won that, but he's certainly never going to make the $14.5 million back that he left on the table this year. It's two different things, but you're right. The Steelers, if Antonio Brown decides not to play and the Steelers don't get a commensurate return for Antonio Brown, they'll keep him, and he's got to make a decision whether he's going to play or whether he's not going to play. And to me, his only move is not to play.
That's crazy. It's crazy. It's how you interpret this is interesting. Whether is this a good deal for the Bills, a bad deal for the Bills? They went through this. They don't get Antonio Brown. There's no question this is bad for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And